You are really inputting over the last several years what you do in music, aren't you? I mean, the Ritchie Association, Lionel Association.
Well, you know what I try to do
Yeah.
is I try to change sounds with each album,
But it's you.
but the common denominator is me.
Yeah.
I always sing the same on these
Yes,
songs.
you're consistent.
But I mean, what everybody thought I was crazy when I went to work with Lionel. And they said, he's an R&B singer and he's an R&B producer, and that was exactly what I wanted. My favorite album ever was Ray Charles's country record, the Modern Country Sounds,
Yes, yeah.
where he did Georgia and he did a bunch of the country songs that were just to me. And what he did was he took country tracks and sang R&B. So all I did was I took R&B tracks and sang country.
Born to Lose.
So because there's just really, and I know, there's just a fine line between country and R&B music, and because country music is the white man's rhythm and blues. It's the basic. The beauty of R&B and the beauty of country is that if it hurts, they say it hurts. They don't get into all the flowery, beautiful poetry. It's just, God damn it, it hurts, and that's what makes it so. That's why country music will always have its reign. Every 10 years or so, country music comes back to the fore because it's the basis to all music in this country. And it goes from country to country folk to folk pop to pop rock to rock jazz to jazz psychedelic. And then all of a sudden, Glenn Campbell came back in with By the Time I Get to Phoenix, and everybody went, Jesus, I know what he means. And then we came right along. At one time, we were the ones that brought it back with Ruby, Don't Take Your Love to Town. It was one of those moments in time where music had gotten so obtuse that the average man who was not involved in the culture, White Rabbit was the biggest record when Ruby came out, and White Rabbit, if you're not doing drugs and if you don't understand the drug culture, you don't know what the songs are about. So for someone to come out with a song that you understand the minute you hear it, it's very refreshing, So then it starts that whole cycle.
Eagles did the same kind of thing.
Absolutely.
Lying
The
Eyes,
simplicity of what they did.
Very simple song. But you have really taken charge of your musical direction.
I've always been in charge of it.
Even back then with Larry and others,
Well, even when I was working at Warner Brothers, Jimmy Bowen, I co-produced most of those things, and with Mike Post, Mike did. I mean, they all did certain songs that I didn't co-produce, but Jimmy Bowen is the guy that told me you really need to stay in charge. You can't ever depend on somebody else to come up with a sound for you. You've got to know where you are and where you're going and how you're going to get there. And he said, and the thing that I've learned about these albums is that it's kind of a strange philosophy, and I think when I tell people this, everybody kind of laughs at it, but I think there's a real truism to this statement. I've thought about this, and basically my theory about this business is that it's not how many you please, it's how few you offend that give you longevity. Because if you don't offend anybody, you've got 200 million people you've got a 200 million shot on every record. The minute you focus on a 14 to 16-year-old group or a 14 to 20-year-old group, then you're narrowing it down to about 15 million people. So my feelings are, if I do a record that doesn't offend these young kids, I can walk down in front of the Roxy, and it's amazing to me. I'm always amazed how those kids with the pink spiked hair know who I am and react. I can walk down there and create a problem just walking in front, and it amazes me. I would think of all the places in the world I could walk by there and no one would know who I am. So I like that. I like that they may not like my music, or they may at least they may tolerate my music, but they don't laugh at me, they don't put me down, and that's important to me.
Are you ever bothered by critics or the super hip writers or things like that?
I've been real blessed by critics because I've had so few bad reviews, and most of the bad reviews I've got, in retrospect, I deserved. I think that what happens is there comes times in your life when you get so comfortable with your success that you don't feel the responsibility that goes with that success. And every now and then somebody needs to slap you down. The harshest reviews I've ever gotten are the ones that said he walked through the show. Well, I think I have been very capable of walking through shows. And usually when I get those, I'm offended because, my gut reaction is, I didn't feel but the more I sit back and think about it, I think, I guess I did walk through it, So I found that a good reviewer, if they not only tell you the bad side, but if they at least reflect the audience's response to you, that he's done his job. I don't mind a review that just kills me through the whole review if at the end he says, but the audience loved him. because then you're dealing with one man's opinion. But I don't want the person reading the article to say everybody there felt like this. And I think that's what happens with reviewers, is they don't reflect. And by the same token, if a guy says, I don't understand why the people there didn't like him, I thought he was great, then at least you're getting a fair shot at what took place that night.
Does it ever bother you that maybe the super hip again don't rate you with Bruce Springsteen, who they make a god up there?
No, I don't think I am Bruce Springsteen. I think, it's like when I was really at the peak, which I guess was in the first part of 80, 79 or 80, when I was winning all the awards and I had everything I did just blew to the top. I was getting all this stuff about that I was, they were comparing me to Elvis Presley because of the people that I drew, and I was breaking records that he had held for years and still hold a lot of those records. And the same thing was true with that Elvis Presley was a very special man. He changed the course of music. I didn't do that. All I did was had some hit records. I had a lot of success at it. But I mean, I think if you're capable of being objective about who you are and what you do, you can't get offended by those things. I'm not Bruce Springsteen. I would love to be able to do similar things to Bruce Springsteen. My Hometown is one of my favorite songs, But at the same time, I can only do what I can do. I think that, again, if reviewers are careful, and most of them are, to state this is my opinion, I don't care what they say. It does hurt. I mean, I can't say to you, I've gotten to the point that I think it's only fair. I don't, as a rule, go searching for reviews, because I think if you believe the good ones, you got to believe the bad ones. So
the ratings,
they all even out somehow or other.
Well, because some of the interviews I've read of you, you sound almost defensive sometimes about the music. I don't mean about the performance, and that bothers me, because what you do the best at what you do.
Well, you know what? I'm not defensive, and I don't mean to sound that. What I do is I think I'm very realistic. That I don't think there's anything particularly creative about what I do. I think I have a knack for finding great songs. That's my strength.
That's what you do.
And I'm a good storyteller. I think I tell stories as well as anybody in the business. I'm not a great singer, but I'm a stylist. When I first started working with Lionel, or with Barry Gibb is where it really came out. He kept giving me all these little licks, and I said, Barry, I am not the Bee Gees. I don't want to sound like the Bee Gees. I said, it's important that you give me some expression in this song. And I think he finally allowed me to do that. But what I think maybe what you're feeling in these articles is, I have always been one that believed that if you build yourself up, they're going to tear you down. If you tear yourself down, they'll build you up. So I always just try to take that mediocre approach, and it's so diffusing to if you're doing an interview with a reviewer who plans on tearing you apart. And you say to him, hey, I know I'm not a great singer. I don't know. All I did was I went out and I sang my song. Yeah. What's he going to say? Yeah. It doesn't do him any good to say you're not a great singer. Yeah. You've already said it. Yeah. So then all he has to do is reflect what the audience did. So it's kind of a mechanism that works. I think that there was a time when I said so many times I'm not a good singer in this mechanism usage that I almost started believing it.
That it sounds like you're saying you're putting yourself away.
I really almost started believing it. I started saying, well, Jesus, I can't sing. But I mean, I was with a jazz group for 9 years, and I did high, low, and 4 freshmen, kind of very intricate. I know I can sing. I know that I've gotten comfortable with not singing, and I've been very successful not singing, as a Kenny Loggins would do. Some of these guys that can, to me, Steve Perry is one I love the way he sings, but they're like Kenny Loggins is a vocal gymnast. He does things with his voice that very few people can do. I could do that, but I mean, I was much younger at the time, and I used it all the time. A voice is like any muscle. If you don't use it consistently, your range starts closing in on you. But I made my most money after my range closed in. So,
what's the danger of a certain sameness of your feeling when you're going out and playing that? Geez, I'm just doing it again. Do you get the rush still?
Yeah, well, what happens is the thing I have learned most about this business is that performing, people want to hear hits. I can do an hour and 15 minutes of nothing but hits from one song to the next. That's a great artillery to have. So the sameness in itself, the one thing I've learned is that you can do new material if you intersperse it between hits, because psychologically, when an audience is watching an artist sing, if it's a new song, it's work to them. They have to listen to decide whether they like it or not. A hit, they know it. They know they like it. They can sit back and relax. So you can hit them with a new song and in so many words say, listen to this. This is new and this is special. And they will listen and they'll pay their dues and they'll grunt through it and they either like it or they don't like it if it's one of those magical songs that has that initial impact. But boy, the minute you relieve them and you start this hit, it's like, okay, now I don't have to work anymore.
They're back home again.
So you can do that, and you have to play that in a show in order to introduce new material. So to me, the greatest, someone said, do you ever get tired of doing Ruby Don't Take Your Love to Town and Coward of the County and all those songs? Hey, I mean, it's like saying, does McEnroe get tired of hitting his forehand? No, I mean, I don't. I love them.
How about you've got the kind of audience that they're not critical at all. They love you. I mean, the people you got in my life. How do you avoid being, that attitude, I'm just going to throw my glove on the field and I got him tonight, how?
Well, I went through a whole thing where when I used to go out and every night I felt it was a battle between me and the audience and one of us was going to win. Either I was going to win or they were going to win. And it was a true contest. And then I sat down one day, after I'd really just ground myself in the ground worrying about that I had to go out every night and be my very, very best to please these people. And I realized one night that if I go out there, these people went to a lot of trouble to get here. Number one, they paid a lot of money for these tickets. Number two, they had to buy them a month or so in advance. Most of those tickets they still have to stand in line to get. They had to park that night. They had to make arrangements for babysitters. They went to a lot of trouble to come here. That if I go out there, if I don't screw up, they're going to have a great time. And if I screw up, they're going to have a great time. So they love to see me screw up because I think I've become more personality than I am a singer.
Exactly.
And I think that I need to constantly have new songs because the demographics in my show are unbelievable. 10% of my audience, believe it or not, is below 15. Another 10% is above 60. So the heaviest demographics for me are, I think, between 27 and 45, somewhere in there. That's where the real heavy bulk goes. But I've got a wide range of demographics. So to me, I have these young kids, and what keeps me going, and I don't realize it until I work a Las Vegas showroom where it's all adults, is that energy of those young kids rushing that stage when I come on stage. And they're only there 2 songs. We let them come up for 2 songs, and then we set them down again. But all of a sudden you go to Las Vegas and you're out there and everyone's sitting there watching you, and it's what most people get who don't do concerts, and you realize how spoiled you get. But that's what keeps you going and keeps you energized. That sudden rush at the front of the show pumps you up for the rest of the show.
What kind of date now would give you real drive? A Hollywood Bowl or Carnegie Hall or
none of those things mean anything to me.
Would anything mean
to me? I work 150, 160, sometimes 180 shows a year, and what really gives me, my punch is an audience that enjoys the show. I told somebody one night we worked a small hall in some faraway place because I do believe that it's important that you work these secondary markets. I think that record sales can be totally backed up by concert performances. I think you can get like Lionel Richie, for instance, might be able to sell records for a year without performing, but if he goes 2 years without performing, he's not going to sell records. It's pretty simple. It's a mathematical equation because you go right behind these concerts and you see record sales. And so I go to a lot of these secondary markets in the process of doing. We were working like a 3,000 or 4,000 seat hall one night. This is 7 years ago. And I made a joke about these people. I said, just don't feel bad about the fact that there's not that many people here tonight. I said, given the choice, I'd much rather work for a small group of people who care than a large group of people who don't care. I said, the truth is, I'd much rather work for a large group of people who care than
all of the people all of the time.
But it was, I just think that, something happened to me when I had my throat operation, right before my throat operation. That was really one of the most, in 20 years of being in the business, it was one of the most touching things that's ever happened to me because I do have a tendency, because I'm so realistic in my total outlook on life, I try not to hype myself at any time. I try not to let myself be hyped. But I've always kind of had this outlook that as much as I appreciated what the fans, quotation mark, supporters did for me, that it was really a commercial arrangement because having been with the first edition and lost it and saw how quickly they dropped me It was always like, okay, here's our understanding. As long as I have hit records, you'll show up. When I quit having them, you're going to quit showing up. And if I don't do things right, you're not going to like this, and I'm going to pay for it sooner. And I understand it, and I'm happy with that, and that's our deal. Well, started off in Salt Lake City, and I went to Salt Lake City and kind of struggled through a show. I was so hoarse. And I told the guys, I said, we were going to Eugene, Oregon the next day. I said, we really need to cancel this show because I can't sing. And for years, I've been able to kind of bluff my way through because of the style. It's not like I am a Bruce Springsteen or a Rod Stewart who has to scream and scream and scream. I kind of talk through most of these songs anyway. So we went to Eugene, Oregon, and I said, look, I'll try. But I'm telling you, if I can't do this show, I'm going to quit. So we got out there, and I think the Gatlin brothers were with me, maybe Lee Greenwood even. And they had already done their shows. I think it was Sawyer Brown. And I went out, and the first song, I just started talking. I couldn't talk. I couldn't talk. Forget singing. I couldn't talk at all. And I tried to do the first song, and I kind of stumbled through it. And at the end of the first song, I just stopped the band, and I said, this is not what you paid for, and I can't do this to you. And I said, I just want you to know I'm going to give everybody your money back. And the first two acts, that part of the show was on me. And I just want you to know that I'll come back when my throat is good. Everybody, no, we don't want you to. And I said, look, I can't even talk. I can't sing. Do the Gambler. I said, I can't do the Gambler. I can't even talk. I said, I'll tell you what, I'm going to do the Gambler. I'm going to show you how this sounds. I did an hour and 10 minutes that night. Couldn't talk, couldn't sing. They loved it. I mean, the worse I was, the more we laughed together. I'd screw up notes, and I'd start dying, and the whole audience would just break up. Oh. I did Lady, believe it or not.
Oh, my God.
It was terrible. I mean, it's the worst.
Holding notes.
Lionel would have died.
Cracking.
Would have died.
Yeah.
But the people loved it. And I realized at that point that they really do care about me. That I have become more of a personality than a singer. That my music is almost secondary at this point. And it was very touching to me, and very few things.